Hi, everyone. My name's Logan Simpson, and I'm a linguist at an Aboriginal language center in remote Western Australia. But working with writing systems and scripts is sort of my own personal interest and something that I'm hope to get back into when I do my PhD. And working with this writing system was something that I did as part of my linguistics program at SOAS in the UK. So just a bit of background on this system and other missionary writing systems. So when European and American missionaries came to China, they began to develop different writing systems for different varieties of Chinese. Um, I guess they thought that learning Chinese characters was too difficult. This was particularly popular in the 1850s. And many of these writing systems have been lost, destroyed, or those that are remaining lack study. And so a few records of an invented phonetic writing system for Shanghainese exist, and I believe were found in the Oxford Bodleian Library. And my advisor at SOAS, Yen Jiang, encouraged me to do some work on this writing system. So just a bit of info about Shanghainese. It's a sub-variety of Wu Chinese, one of the 7 main varieties of Chinese languages. It shares only 29% of its lexicon with Standard Mandarin. It's estimated that there are 80 million Wu speakers and 14 million Shanghainese speakers. It's not very similar to other Asian tonal languages. It's actually more similar to African tonal languages. And yeah, modern Shanghainese has 5 tones, but in the 1850s, when this writing system was invented, it had 8 tones. This is the inventor, Reverend T.P. Crawford. He was a Baptist missionary to China for 50 years in Shanghai and Shandong. And I should also mention that his wife, Martha, was with him the entire time, and she probably also helped him invent this writing system, but she doesn't usually tend to get credit for it. After his arrival in Shanghai in 1852, he participated in a conference with other missionaries to develop a writing system. And it was sort of a competition, I think, and he ended up winning. He got his initial idea for this writing system from observing the Chinese character for door, man. And you'll see later on sort of how he built off of this character. So yeah, after more than a year of development, his symbols were presented to and accepted by the committee. And at one point, all missionaries in Shanghai were using the symbols, and a few hundred locals could read and write using them. So the system, it doesn't really have a proper name. It's just called the Crawford Phonetic Symbols. So it's a phonemic featural alphabet in which all symbols are divided into the initial consonant and the final vowel. And so one initial symbol and one final symbol are combined into a syllable block similar to Hangul. And the basic framework of this writing system is a perpendicular line with all consonants to the left and all vowels to the right. It has 41 initials and 28 finals, not all of which would still be in use today. And it has a really ingenious way of representing the original 8 tones of Shanghainese. So this is just an example of what the manual looks like. Over on the left, you can see that perpendicular line, and everything to the left of it. And I'll go into more detail later about how you can actually distinguish the sounds, but you can see what I'm trying to show is that everything is to the left of the line. So that's how you know that it's an initial. And then over here on the right, you do not have a line, but you would connect those symbols to the right of those lines to create your syllable block. So over here on the left image, these are examples of the finals. So in that top right box in the left image, that's one of the finals. And then if you go down the list, you can see it attached to the initial on the right hand side of each symbol. You can see the left is different as you go down, and the right is always the same. So this, and in between, it will have a Chinese character telling you the pronunciation. So that's sort of how the manual works. I'll get into this in more detail in the next slide, but this is just an example of how the tones work. So they're split by upper and lower tone class, depending on whether you have that little notch. And then you have different dots in different areas to distinguish further which tone. So I'll just explain. So yeah, a small upward hook at the bottom of the perpendicular line determines whether the tone is in the lower tonal class or in the upper tonal class. And then a dot in the lower left of the final character represents the first tone. In the upper left corner, it represents the second tone, and in the upper right corner, the third tone, and if there's no dot, the fourth tone. And then you can see how you can easily get up to 8 depending on whether you have the hook at the bottom or not. So rules for initials. So the shape determines the place and manner of articulation as well. So if you have a right triangle on the left of the perpendicular, this sounds confusing at first, but later when I show the images again, I think it will make more sense. So if you have a triangle, it indicates an aspirated consonant. No triangle indicates a sonant. A small square indicates a nasalized consonant. A single horizontal line indicates a guttural consonant. A right slanting upward stroke indicates a liquid consonant. A stroke to the left in the middle of the line indicates a dental. And 2 strokes to the left near the top indicate a labial consonant. So here's a graph of this. So you'll have the number, and then you'll have the Crawford symbol, and then the Latin letter that was from the manual, and then a few examples of possible pronunciation with Chinese characters, and then what I have given it as sort of modern International Phonetic Alphabet equivalent. So if we go over to the first one, we can see we've got a k, and then if you have this hook, it'll change to a g. And then if you've got that triangle, you can see that you've got aspiration, and that pretty much follows through with the whole thing. We can come back and look at this later if anybody has questions during the presentation. I'll just sort of give you a second to look at it now, or you can pause the video. Moving on. So rules for the finals. So all final vowel sounds are made to the right of the perpendicular line. They sort of have, they're not really dots, they're more like little slashes. So you'll have 2 of them to the right of the perpendicular indicates a nasalized vowel. A single one on the right indicates that the final ends in a glottal stop, and 2 strokes to the right of the perpendicular, a big one and a small one, indicate that the vowel is a diphthong. So yeah, if we go over here to the first one, we can see we don't have any dots here, so it's just a regular "ah." And then here we have the single one, so we've got a glottal stop. And then here we have 2, we have a nasal, and then we've got that line above, which indicates a diphthong. And it pretty much goes through in the same manner throughout the rest of the chart. And then these are the initials divided into their different phone classes. So as you can see here, if you don't have the hook, it is unvoiced. If you have the hook, it's voiced. And if you have this triangle, it's aspirated. And you can see these going throughout the chart. So you can pause it if you want to take a look. And these is the same chart for the final phone classes. So here you can see again, there's no dots in this one. So it's just a regular "ah," and then you've got the glottal stop and the nasalized. And you can stop the video if you want to take a look. So just a quick evaluation in terms of it being a sound writing system or not. So the writing system does meet Monroe's requirement that one symbol must represent only one phoneme and that one phoneme must always be represented by the same symbol. It meets Snyder's requirement that native speakers need to have input into the development of the orthography. And I haven't discussed this, but I did find from the manual that they did work with a local man to develop this over the year that they worked on it. It meets Hinton's requirement that the characters are easily distinguished from one another. It may not look like that at first, but I think that once you learn how the symbols are made up, that they are easily distinguished from one another. And it meets Lojanga's requirement that tonal representation by punctuation is better than representation by accents with languages with more than 3 tones, and this has 8. So overall, I think that it is linguistically sound, but it would not be realistically accepted in Shanghai today. So just a quick conclusion. This is a sound writing system meeting many of the orthography development requirements, but it's not likely that this orthography would ever be used to represent Shanghainese in the present, but I hope that it could be easily adapted to represent other multi-tonal languages that are looking for a writing system. By comparing the restored writing system with other sources from the same period, I've confirmed a few sound changes. And I hope that this kind of study sort of helps to fill the gap in missionary linguistics and to provide new insights into the process of orthography invention, development, and acceptance. And I'm excited to see what everyone else is going to present about. Thanks.